Hello and welcome to Continental Prime here on News Center Television, reaching you live from Nigeria's economic capital, Lagos. The headlines for this hour. Nigeria's cabinet completes a two-day ministerial retreat with the president promising to build a more resilient economy. United Nations top court rules largely in favor of Somalia in their maritime border dispute with Kenya. 25 more unidentified bodies found in mass graves in the Libyan town of Tarhuna. Details shortly. For our viewers across Africa and the rest of the world, this is Continental Prime. I'm Sulaiman Aleda. We begin in Nigeria, where the federal government has expressed confidence that it can surmount current challenges. This was during the 2021 Interministerial Retreat and Performance Review session currently held at Abuja's State House. The retreat, which is also expected to appraise the fulfillment of President Muhammadu Buhari's campaign promises to Nigerians, will also review current challenges affecting the country to proffering solutions. Our correspondent Amadi Uyi has more.
The ministerial retreat was for senior cabinet members and members of Nigeria's federal executive team. It was also an opportunity to educate 7 cabinet members on the importance of working together as a team.
Interministerial collaboration is vital to driving increased impact and effective delivery.
Nigeria's Secretary to the Government of the Federation highlighted to those in attendance the purpose of the retreat and its importance to the nation.
Key focus of this midterm ministerial retreat is to review the status of progress towards the delivery of 9 priority areas. This is intended to harness our collective contributions towards generating practicable solutions that will guarantee the level of impact we can be proud of by the end of our tenure. The retreat also aims to deepen collaboration and enhance cohesion among cabinet members for efficient and effective service delivery.
While Nigeria's president, who was in attendance, assured of his participation at the entire retreat, he disclosed that since the advent of the second tenure of the current administration, there has been an increased spotlight on the performance of federal ministers.
Over the past 2 years, ministers have rendered reports to the Federal Executive Council on their activities related to the achievement of their ministerial mandates.
Though the team was adequately educated on factors inhibiting their performance, most notably a lack of interministerial collaboration, Nigeria's Vice President assured those in attendance that the federal government can surmount whatever challenge is being faced by the country.
We are at a point in our economic history where everything is possible. Everything is possible. And I'm completely convinced that even the challenges that we see today are challenges that can be resolved very, very easily, so long as we're all prepared to work together towards the same objectives.
From Abuja, Amadin Uyi, News Central Television.
For more on the ministerial retreat and mid-term review, I'm now being joined online by the Executive Director of Lead Network Africa, Chukwuma Kenwa. Well, good to see you, Chukwuma. You know, many issues have been tabled so far by the President, his deputy, and of course, so many other guest speakers, as much as the AFDB President, Mr. Adesina. Are there areas of interest from what was said at the retreat?
Well, one of the things I observed from the submissions of Mr. President and the report, which is quite worrisome, is that when you want to measure performance, records must be matched with realities. And of course, we expect to see numbers creditably represented in some issues such as that of bar. I think the statement of Mr. President when he has to do with assessing performance in bar was rather ambiguous, talking about a system they have deployed to ensure that power gets to undeserved Nigerians. And I begin to ask, who are those undeserved aspects of the society? I expected to see from Mr. President how many watts of energy has been improved under your own administration, and then what are the critical plans you have yearly from now until the projected 2025. Of course, his administration is going to end in less than 2 years, but he already has planned. But having spent 6 years, there is no clear structured plan to show that Mr. President is committed to anything in terms of improving power. I'm also concerned of the very fact that despite the fact that the economy under him has been going down continually, and that one of the models he adopted, which of course is the conditional cash transfers, it's not sustainable. You want to model after great nations like America, but even you have a situation now where your debt is almost outweighing your revenue. It ought not to be so. And with that, he's thinking of expanding the social register, national social register, to accommodate more 1 million Nigerians. And we know that these are part of the conduits through which the monies of the country are lost.
Now, let's take the case of power, which you mentioned. What are those key indicatives you would have loved to see in the president's speech, especially when he spoke before his ministers?
According to Lord Kelvin, when you talk about something, you must be able to talk about in terms of numbers. And Kelvin alludes that if you are not able to talk in terms of numbers, then what that actually means is that you lack a qualitative knowledge of what you are talking about. So what this particularly means is that if the president cannot be able to tell us in terms of numbers how many, to what extent has power improved under him, then what that practically means is that he has not done a lot in that aspect. He has not.
Art, how would you rate the federal government's economic sustainability plan regarding its implementation and prospects, going by what the vice president said, saying that whatever the country is going through can be surmounted, is surmountable, I beg your pardon?
Of course, before you talk about sustainability plan, no plan works without the political will. I have not seen, and we have not seen, any clear demonstration, commitment under this administration to do the needful in terms of rejigging the economy on the path of recovery. We are not just talking about celebrating like minor numbers where you witness a 2% growth and then 5% growth, which is now the highest in 6 years, and that is what we are celebrating. We know that some other nations were during their development process when they were still developing. Figures that they celebrated were like 18%. We saw China's rising. How does 2% constitute a rising for our nation? And why will anyone be celebrating that when we've not seen political will in cutting down government expenditures, cutting down like just the proposed budget that we saw recently? We saw how much was earmarked for the president's travels and of course his feeding plan. And you wonder if a president on his own could not make certain sacrifices in a time of economic hardship and turmoil as we are in this point, then the person is not in any way committed towards ensuring that the economy recovers. Because at the moment, of course, when you talk about economics, you must match records with realities. On papers, the economy grew. On papers, the nation recovered from recession. But in reality, the inflation and the chances of the common man to survive, it's becoming quite very biting. And Nigerians can attest to that.
You know, one of the key things Nigeria is dealing with at the moment is insecurity. And the president also made reference to that when he said the government has been able to approve 13.3 billion naira to kickstart the community policing initiative across the country. How do you see this helping to solve the lingering insecurity problem in Nigeria?
Honestly, have we funded the police force as the key security agent to manage the internal security crisis all across the nation? We even have a situation where the military are seemingly taking over the position of the police in terms of internal security. We keep weakening the police force. And if you have a weak police and then you now have an initiative to collaborate with the citizens to work more with the police, share intelligence, share information, call the police when there are issues up. If the police force is not strong enough to contain the current challenges, a weak police force cannot play a vital role as a partner in community policing. So you have community, you have police there, the two have to work together. And we know that the police have to be strong to be able to ensure that the initiative of community policing work. They need to be funded, they need operational vehicles, they need all of the upgraded arms and rifles. So if they don't have all of those things and challenges like we've seen in various communities, pockets of violence are such that the ammunitions that are available to the miscreants are stronger than those of the police. How will that constitute a more secure nation? So I see that as a misplaced priority. Let's do the first things first. In fact, as a matter of fact, I'm one of those who have always advocated the military should go back to the barracks. Let their basic role, or constitutional role of protecting the territorial integrity of the nation, let's still maintain it. Let's invest into the police force, retrain, and most importantly, focus on the recruitment process. Because when you look at the caliber of people in the police force, it's worrisome that due diligence is not done in ensuring that the right kind of persons with clean records are recruited into a very sensitive platform such as the Nigerian police.
Chukwuma Okenwa, many thanks for speaking with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, staying in Nigeria, the upper legislature has granted the country's election umpire the sole power to determine the mode of transmitting election results. This followed the reversal of the Senate's earlier decision that the Independent National Electoral Commission may consider the electronic transmission of results provided national network coverage is adjudged to be adequate and secure. The Senate also resolved that voting at an election and transmission of results shall be by the procedure determined by the Commission, which may include electronic voting. The federal government of Nigeria has been criticized for its inability to fulfill requirements demanded by the United Nations Convention Against Torture. Several civil society organizations disclosed to journalists in Abuja that Nigeria has not submitted any report to the world body in the last 20 years. They say, despite the convention insisting that the right to dignity of Nigerians must be respected and the use of torture and degrading treatment by security agencies jettisoned, that has not been the case in Nigeria.
Nigeria as a country signed and ratified the UN Convention Against Torture, ill treatment and inhuman treatment, degrading treatment in Nigeria at the level of the UN. We are supposed as a country, haven't done that, to be presenting periodic reports of the state of torture in the country and how we are addressing it as a nation. But this is 20 years down the line. Like I said, the country has not submitted a report to the Convention Against Torture. The government is also trying to develop its own reports. So the National Human Rights Commission and also the Ministry of Justice and Foreign Affairs are trying to put something together because it's important that Nigeria fulfills our obligation to the UN. We can't afford to go to the international and just ratify this document and then afterwards we don't fulfill our own obligation in terms of reporting.
Nigerians didn't know what torture was. Our people were not tortured. We didn't have prisons. We didn't have prison system until the coming of the white man. So torture is not even something you need to say Nigeria has it and it's not in other countries. It's there, it's everywhere. But what we are saying is that it is wrong. Human beings, your fundamental rights are rights that accrue to you for simply being a human being. And the right to dignity is one of the most fundamental of them. And torture is a deviation from that right. And what we are saying is that no matter the country where you are or your location, you should not be tortured.
Then on no basis should torture be used to get information from anyone. We think that if we need to make sure that forensic equipments are put for the police, we need to make sure that proper investigative policing, it should be made. We need to encourage the proper relationship between the community and security agencies so that they can give them information, the proper surveillance done, use of technology. There's so many things you can do to be able to get information that will enable you to find out who have committed a crime.
West Africa, Colonel Major Gilbert Ouedraogo is now the new Chief of Staff of Burkina Faso's armed forces. Speaking on his new role, Ouedraogo says he views a large-scale reorganization of the armed forces as a vital part of fighting terrorism in Burkina Faso.
Ce n'est pas un changement improvisé, ça rentre dans le cadre d'une vision. Et cette vision intervient à un moment où, effectivement, nous avons redessiné la stratégie de lutte contre le terrorisme. Donc, nous attendons du nouveau chef d'état-major général qu'il remobilise les troupes, qu'il réorganise l'ensemble des forces pour les relancer de manière beaucoup plus efficace dans la lutte contre cette menace qui évolue et pour laquelle nous devons donc nous adapter en permanence.
Il nous faut peaufiner et accélérer la mutation des forces armées nationales en les réorganisant au double plan structurel et territorial pour les rendre plus réactives, opérationnelles et efficientes. C'est la vision qui m'anime en ce jour mémorable où je prends les rênes des forces armées nationales, convaincu que la réorganisation est l'une des conditions impératives de succès dans la lutte contre le terrorisme. Le terrorisme dans sa globalité a plongé notre pays dans une guerre dite asymétrique depuis 2015. Il s'agit d'une guerre irrégulière, une guerre non conventionnelle à laquelle les forces armées nationales n'étaient pas suffisamment préparées. Elles apprennent donc dans la douleur à faire face à cette situation inédite qui commande qu'elles s'adaptent constamment.
Staying in Burkina Faso, the trial of 14 men accused of killing the country's one-time leader, Thomas Sankara, continued today in Ouagadougou's capital. However, lawyers in the country are unhappy that the trial has not been recorded. They are also sharing their thoughts and opinions on the proceedings so far.
C'est pas juste, bien sûr. C'est vraiment pas juste qu'il ne soit pas là. Il devrait être là. Il devrait avoir le courage d'être là. Mais bon, vous savez, c'est pas tout le monde qui est courageux. Ou il fuit la vérité.
Mais déjà, c'est un jour historique pour nous parce que on ne pensait pas vivre ce jour très spécial. Qu'est-ce qu'on attend?
Les conseils des prévenus en visant à obtenir un délai raisonnable pour examiner les pièces du dossier est une demande qui nous paraissait être fondée dans son principe. C'est d'ailleurs la raison pour laquelle, en tant que conseil de la partie civile, nous n'avons pas formulé d'objection particulière. Ils ont demandé 1 mois, le tribunal leur a accordé 2 semaines. Nous estimons que c'est un délai raisonnable.
Évidemment, parce que nous avions espéré, pensé que ce procès aurait pu, voire aurait dû être enregistré, parce que nous estimons que c'est un pan de la grande histoire du Burkina qui s'écrit à travers ce procès. Et pour les générations futures, il aurait été bon que nous ayons des archives fiables, permettre, à la communauté mémorielle de ce pays de se souvenir de ce qui s'est passé en 1987 et d'en tirer des leçons. Malheureusement, le tribunal en a décidé autrement. Mais écoutez, nous prenons acte parce que nous devons de respecter les décisions du tribunal.
Parce qu'on l'a demandé, j'ai soutenu la demande de renvoi parce que les concerts ont été commis d'office il y a quelques semaines, alors que le dossier, c'est une cantine, le président même l'a dit, il y a 20 000 pages, ça c'est RFI même.
A suspected commander of the Central African Republic's Seleka rebels has appeared at the International Criminal Court in Central Africa. Mohamed Kani is accused of using state machinery for hunting down, detain, kill and torture supporters of the deposed president, Francois Bozize. According to the prosecution, many suspected Bozize loyalists were shot in the back while running away. Women and girls were raped in front of their children and parents. Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan accuses him of being in the room when the crimes were committed.
This is as straightforward a case as is likely to come before this court. It is a detention case, and we say the evidence overwhelmingly shows that Mr. Said was in the room where it happened. The hold below is the location where many of those unfortunate souls were placed in terrible conditions without toilet, food, or any type of care, that literally standing on their heads, trampling on their dignity, stamping on their rights. He cannot plead ignorance. The smell was awful. The proximity could not have been closer. This is the type of criminality that gave rise to the charges before your honours.
Well, still in the region, some cherry news. Equatorial Guinea is celebrating its 53rd independence anniversary today, October 12th. Now, this is the day the Central African country gained complete independence from Spain after being one of the colonies for nearly 300 years. New Central's Ni Omoni has more on this.
Located on the west coast of Africa, Equatorial Guinea is a small oil-rich country made up of a mainland territory called Rio Muni and 5 islands. Portuguese explorers first settled in Equatorial Guinea in 1472 and retained control for 3 centuries, over 300 years, until Spain gained control of the territory in 1778 after Portuguese settlers agreed on a deal to surrender the territory in exchange for land in South America. When the Spanish Common War broke out in 1820, revolt powers took control of the state. The territory of Equatorial Guinea turned into a Spanish colony in the 1900s. After Spain's control, the territory was known as the Colony of Spanish Guinea. In 1946, a status was raised to a province. In 1959, Spain attempted fractional decolonization and divided Spanish Guinea into the provinces of Bioko and Rio Muni that comprised a Spanish overseas territory. However, the attempt failed badly. Having been under Spain's control for so long, Equatorial Guinea is the only sovereign African state in which Spanish is an official language, with 68% of Equatorial Guineans speaking it. With escalating pressure from Equatorial Guinean nationalists and the United Nations General Assembly, the journey to independence was underway. In March 1968, Spain agreed to grant independence to Equatorial Guinea. And in September 1968, Francisco Nguema became elected as the first president of Equatorial Guinea, and the nation was granted complete independence on October 12th, same year, marking the Independence Day of Republic of Equatorial Guinea. Francisco Nguema served as the country's president for 12 years until he was displaced by his own nephew, Teodoro Obiang Nguema, in 1979, who rules Equatorial Guinea till date. The Independence Day in Equatorial Guinea is a proud day for the nation and every Equatorial Guinean. The event is celebrated with great devotion and enthusiasm as it reminds the citizens of the unforgettable struggle and sacrifices made by their forefathers for the next generations to live in freedom. Ni Omoni, New Central.
Moving to East Africa, the United Nations top court has ruled primarily in favor of Somalia in its long-running dispute with Kenya over its maritime border. 14 judges sitting in The Hague said Kenya had not proved that Somalia had previously agreed to its claimed border. The case concerned a 38,000 square mile triangle in the Indian Ocean that is rich in oil and gas. In a tweet, Somalia's Information Minister Osman Dube welcomed the ruling and congratulated Somalis on regaining their territory. In South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa has declared November 1 the date for local government elections, a public holiday to enable voters to cast their ballots. The president called on employers to make provision for their employees to exercise their right to vote. He also called for the adherence to COVID-19 containment protocols to avoid the risk of spreading the virus during the exercise. The local government polls are held every 5 years to elect leaders who will sit on the councils that run cities. The elections also determine who will be mayor of major cities. Now, the United Nations Human Rights Office, OHCHR, has expressed concern about the continued suffering of migrants and asylum seekers in Libya. A spokesperson for the agency, Martha Hurtado, speaking to reporters in Geneva, said the recent report by the independent fact-finding mission on Libya concluded that the widespread and systematic violations suffered by migrants in the country could amount to crimes against humanity. She also acknowledged the government's promise to free some of the migrants held in the Al-Mabani detention center. However, she reminded the authorities they must protect everyone on their territory, including migrants and asylum seekers.
We are extremely worried about the continued suffering of migrants and asylum seekers in Libya, who are experiencing a myriad of daily violations and abuses at the hands of both state and non-state actors. Recently, there has been a perceptible increase in heavy-handed security operations and raids targeting migrants and asylum seekers. These have resulted in killings and serious injuries, a rise in detentions in appalling conditions, as well as expulsions of individuals to countries in sub-Saharan Africa without due process and in violations of the principles of non-refoulement and the prohibition of collective expulsion. Women, children, and men were arrested and handcuffed. Security forces used unnecessary and disproportionate force to detain them, including shooting and beating those who resisted or tried to escape. As a result, at least one person died, 5 were injured, and more than 4,000 were detained. On October 2nd, hundreds of
Authorities on Tuesday say 25 more unidentified bodies have been found in mass graves in the Libyan town of Tarhuna following years of brutal militia rule. The latest discovery comes after another 10 bodies were uncovered on October 4. The farming town where the bodies were discovered was controlled for years by the Keniyat militia run by 6 brothers who imposed their dominance by slaughtering opponents and their entire families. The Department for Uncovering the Remains say around 200 bodies have so far been found. Watching Continental Prime here on News Central Television. Coming up, confirmed COVID-19 caseload has risen above 251,000 in Kenya. We have updates on this and more after the break. Stay with us. A strong earthquake measuring 6.3 on the Richter scale shook Greece's Crete island on Tuesday. The tremor's epicenter was located in the sea area off the island's southeastern coast at about 23-kilometer depth. Local authorities have reported no injuries or significant damages so far as aftershocks continued in the broader region. A tremor of 4.5 on the Richter scale was recorded a few minutes later off the island of Karpathos in the southeastern Aegean Sea at about some 12 kilometers depth. Now, the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, has called for support and humanitarian assistance for vulnerable Afghans as their country braces for an unexpected harsh winter. Now, UNHCR says that it is boosting the delivery of relief items and its partners for more and more displaced Afghans as humanitarian needs rise with each passing day. Winter is approaching fast in Afghanistan, and tens of thousands of displaced Afghans are at the mercy of cold weather, with a dip in temperature falling to nearly 0 degrees in significant cities of Kabul and Herat. The International Monetary Fund has upwardly revised South Africa's growth outlook from 4 to 5%. In its World Economic Outlook for October released on Tuesday, the multilateral institution said the commodities boom had helped South Africa's economic recovery. The bank, however, warned that South Africa could not solely rely on the commodities cycle for its recovery, especially if there is a correction in commodity prices. The IMF also upwardly revised its growth outlook for sub-Saharan Africa from 3.4 to 3.7%. A joint investment to modernize logistics infrastructure in Africa has been agreed upon between the Dubai ports giant DP World and the UK's Development Finance Agency CDC Group. The $1.7 billion investment will initially expand Egypt's Ain, Sokhna, Senegal's Dakar, and Berbera in Somalia's breakaway region of Somaliland. DP World operates all the ports. According to CDC, the expansion of the 3 ports will support 5 million jobs and add $51 billion to total trade by 2035. Lekon Onabanjo has the rest of the business news.
It's time for business news on NC Continental Prime. You're welcome. I am Lekon Onabanjo. In a new OPEC report, Nigeria has again underperformed in its Organization of Exporting Countries crude oil quota by 224,000 barrels per day in September. Despite these challenges, the country pumped 1.39 million barrels per day, up by 30,000 barrels per day from August. This comes as OPEC and its allies boosted crude oil output by 470,000 barrels per day in September, but still produced far below what it said it would, as many members are still struggling to reach their quotas. However, the report highlights that some countries faced significant disruptions to their operations, many due to damaged infrastructure, as well as COVID-19 oil price crash, among which are Nigeria and Angola. It is time for a change of strategy for Ghana's refining asset, and lending his voice to this is Sylvester Tete, board chair of the Ghana Enterprises Agency. He is backing calls for the transfer of administration of Tema Oil Refinery. Making a submission on the recent missing fuel saga at Tor, the GEA board chair said he is baffled that the management affairs of Tor is still being run as a solely state-owned company. The state-owned refinery, which has once been a formidable crude oil refining entity, has over the years faced a number of operational and managerial setbacks. And talking about hike in fuel price, Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto has hit out at corrupt government officials following the recent fuel hike in that country. Ruto alleged that some private companies were allocated 12 Kenyan shillings per litre. High fuel prices have affected the cost of living in the country, where inflation has been rising since April, hitting an 18-month high in August. Manufacturers and transporters have warned of a jump in the cost of goods and services as they move to pass the high operational costs occasioned by the fuel price jump to the consumers. Following the increase, super petrol, diesel and kerosene went up to 134.72 shillings, 115.60 shillings and 110.82 shillings per litre in Nairobi, as all eyes are on the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority as it moves to review its month's prices, expected to come out on Thursday. In other news, the European Union Trust Fund for Africa has allocated $41 million for rural communities in South Sudan. The intervention will be done via the United Nations Office for Projects and Services and the World Food Programme. The funds will be used to support resilience-building activities, to improve infrastructure and reduce isolation in remote rural areas with agriculture. According to the European Union, part of the funds will also be used for the construction of feeder roads to connect rural communities in parts of northern and western Bahr el Ghazal states and Greater Upper Nile. The World Food Programme's component of the project will be implemented over the course of 4 years through WFP's Smallholder Agriculture Market Support and the Food Assistance for Assets Program components. Now, gross domestic product refers to the value of the final goods and services produced by an economy in a particular period, say a year or a quarter. And due to the fact that economies change over time, there is the need to periodically review or rebase it. How significant is rebasing an economy to African countries? Let's find out in this report. According to Statistics South Africa, rebasing was done in 1999, 2004, 2009, 2014 and in 2021 due to the pandemic and its struggles with inflation and underemployment. Nigeria is currently conducting another rebasing. Rebasing usually helps the country cope with and improve existing realistic metrics.
When you rebase an economy, you are basically rebasing your calculation of the GDP with a different base year. And what this does is it improves data integrity and data accuracy in the sense that it makes your GDP more reflective of recent prices and recent price changes, and also reflective of some of the other economic variables that affect your GDP. Rebasing can also better inform some policy decisions around revenue mobilization, taxation, to be specific, and also policies around what you want to reach out for in terms of foreign and domestic financing.
Government agencies that calculate GDPs use a base year. The frequency matters because of its structural transformation in an economy, inflation and technological progress. Therefore, there is need for periodical rebasing so that the data can always be accurate. What benefits does rebasing give?
One way that countries can grow their GDP and definitely is increasing the output. But increasing the output is not enough to increase welfare. There needs to be efforts to redistribute the wealth and ensure that government can actually tax the growth for the betterment of public expenditure. OECD countries, which more essentially the developed countries, have a tax to GDP ratio of around 30 to 35%. If you compare this with low-income countries, you find that the average is around 12.5.
It is pertinent to know that prospective investors are always eager to know what sectors of an economy are growing, which tends to be the most profitable ones, so that better investment choices are made. And African governments need to periodically know how and where the GDP is being produced through rebasing so that better policies can be implemented. That's the size of business news at this hour. More stories to come on NC Continental Prime. Don't go away. I am Likon Onobanjo.